My name is Lennart Linde. I'm from the Goethe University in Frankfurt. And
I'm Felix.
This is Felix Robra. And well, I'm actually an archaeologist working on Bronze Age hill forts, so there's a lot of forts in my life actually. Felix is a system administrator with the human biology, who actually helps me to get the field work done that we did. Short question, who of you is familiar with the game Dwarf Fortress? Yeah, okay, there's always
quite
a few. Okay, so the first part might not be that interesting. Dwarf Fortress is actually an ASCII-based fantasy world simulator to try to get a definition for this kind of game. And it's developed by Thob and Lelumsigun. They are obviously brothers, and they first released the game in 2006 as a freeware, and from then on moved in to develop the game any further, founded by donations. So by that time, that was actually quite a new approach. Nowadays we have Kickstarter and everything, and people get quite used to it. It's a strict single-player game, which I want to underline because sometimes people think that it's more like a network experience. And it has been the main inspiration to Minecraft. The guy who actually coded Minecraft wanted a more accessible way of playing a game like Dwarf Fortress, which is probably to be considered as the absolute sandbox game. We'll get into that a little bit later. By now it's part of the History of Video Gaming collection by the Museum of Modern Art. And it has a huge community that actually develops additional tools and utilities for making the game playable. I mean, this is not a modding community that tries to change how the game works, it actually tries to make the game accessible. That's true. Okay, the main mode is the fortress mode, where you will have to build a dwarven fortress by designing the layout, set up the workshops, designing functional rooms like bedrooms, dining rooms, whatsoever, micromanage the whole economy of the fort, from setting up stockpiles where they actually set up crafted goods, set up the workflows, gather and mine all the resources, and then trade with the other civilization that might visit your fort and try to come into exchange with you. And also there's a very important part, you have to survive random events, which is also dubbed fun by the players, which is mostly considered of siege and monsters and so-called forgotten beasts appearing at your gates. The game is permadeath, so fun can lead to a quick demise of your fortress, and so it's also adapted, or the Dwarf Fortress claim is called losing is fun, because you will always lose the game in the end. There are also two other modes, which I will just go quickly about, but they are quite vital to our approach. There's the legend mode, which serves as an extended game log, which used to store all the information on the game world, on the inhabitants of the world, on the other civilizations, on the other places, where you can go in adventure mode, which is a more RPG approach, where you will be actually on the road as a single player, walking through the world and interacting with all the different people, civilization, places, and become a part of the lore of the world itself. I told you that the game would be ASCII-based, but actually we rendered it in a tile set, so you can see a little bit more. And even I, for playing hours and hours of it, cannot play it in ASCII still. So we use the tile set. So here we have a basic fortress. I don't know if you have a laser pointer here. Okay. But you can see the fortress layout as the player that used to play the fortress has built it. It's more or less what you would say, orientated on a 16th century fortification. You might know these typical layouts from the Leiden map that we grabbed from Wikipedia. Okay, to make it short, there are linear games, then there are not linear games, like Skyrim for example, and there's Dwarf Fortress. Or to put it another way, we have the learning curve of the more popular games. And you can clearly tell it's quite steep to actually master the game, and even if a lot of dwarves will die on your way to finally get it to work. Another way to put it is from this review in the New York Times. Dwarf Fortress may not look real, but once you're hooked, it feels vast and alive. To control your world, you toggle between multiple menus of text commands. Seemingly simple acts like planting crops and forging weapons require involved choices about soil and season and smelting and ores. A micromanager's dream, the game gleefully blurs the distinction between painstaking labor and creative thrill. So it's quite close to archaeology on the painstaking labor and creative thrill thing. But there's also something that gets the archaeology hooks. It's like planting corpses and forging weapons involve choices. I mean, we as archaeologists, we love choices because choices leave behind a pattern which we could dig and record and explore and, of course, interpret. So what we did with the game in our archaeology approach is we downloaded a random abandoned fort that somebody we've never been in contact with played and put on the internet. Then we visited this fort in the adventure mode, so we created a little dwarven archaeologist, actually traveled to the site, which took us like 3 attempts. We started once, and then we got set up by a bunch of boogeymen, not the boogeymen, a bunch of boogeymen.
On the way to the fortress.
On the way to the fortress. And in the 3rd attempt, we finally arrived there. And then we started to inspect the object, the architecture, and of course the inscriptions that left there. Because once you abandon a fort, all the things that you contained in the fort will be splattered around the place randomly, but still you can map the architecture, and of course the dwarves love to put inscriptions to like all the statues to build, to the walls that they engrave, and so on and so on. I will show you some of that later. And then we record this field data in an actually archaeological way. We process the data with various tools. Because we only have 18 minutes, I cut it short. We will just see some basic stuff, but we did a lot more. And then we draw the archaeological conclusions. And now here's the clue. I used to work a lot with agent-based models in the past months. And if you look at Dwarf Fortress, it's something like a randomized agent-based models. Because what the dwarves engrave, you cannot, for an example, you cannot tell them to engrave this event. They just choose that themselves. Where they put the objects, how they treat the objects, they all do it themselves. You can just control the basic layout of the fort. You can say, put a stockpile here, but you can never actually interact with the single dwarves. So what they leave behind is an archaeological site, like we encounter them every day. Just random spattered things people put there with or without intention, years and years back. So we have one very big advantage when using Dwarf Fortress. We can compare the archaeological model with the in-game log that really logs every single intention, give us biographical data on every villain, enemy and inhabitant of the fortress, and makes it actually possible for us to really compare our archaeological model to the real world history, or to the game world history. So let's see how that turns out. First of all, this is our site. We decided to dig in the northern part of the abandoned fortress. And if you take a look, you can see the walls. This is the gray stuff. Then there's a water mold around it. And then you see all these spattered things. For example, I pointed out, this is our archaeologist standing there, next to a dead dwarf, but that comes later. And here are some barrels, for instance, wooden barrels. And here's the first big difference when we try digital archaeology, or when we try to bring the real-world mythology to the digital age. Of course, there are no material filters, because on most sites, for example, the wooden objects have already rotted away and been not accessible for us to excavate. Of course, there are sites that still have wood, but you know what I mean. And here we see some gems lying around, and mostly the valuable objects have been already taken from the site. Once the archaeology arrives, there are thousands and thousands of years happening, and mostly the valuables have been already gone. So we will still see like every object that has once been in this fort, but they're just displayed. So there's a little bit difference to an archaeological site where we just get a random amount of things that are left on the site. Okay, so what do archaeologists do? We like typology, and I can show you a nice sheet of fibula or a nice sheet of pottery, but I think this is a little bit more accessible. And when you look at the evolution of the mobile telephones, you can clearly see that different forms and shape of the same objects relate to different times. And once we figured out which is the first, it's pretty easy to line them up in a row and see what's the newest model. Yeah, I think that's pretty straightforward. Okay, so our first approach was to try this with the game's objects, but this didn't work because a barrel is always a barrel. There's no distinction in the shape and the size of the barrel. Dwarf Fortress actually has a lot of different materials available, and if you know in which order these materials has been accessed by the player, you know it's pretty Minecrafty way, you just dig down and then once you reach this layer and that layer, and then you have stone and you have flagstone and metal ores. But we could not reach that degree of chronology, so we could not really put a typology of objects there, what we would normally do as an archaeologist. So the things that we had to rely on has been coins. The dwarves actually mint coins and they put a name to it. So in the upper face you can see the description of this coin, and you can see that it is from the year of 9. And as archaeologists, we love coins. You can see these Roman coins of Julius Caesar, because coins allow us two things: to relatively date and to precisely date things. And it works the following way. If we look at the living dates of Mr. Julius Caesar, and we found a Caesar coin, we have a term as antiquem, so after his date of birth, these coins will not be minted anymore. So if we find a coin like this, it should be more or less minted before the 25th of March 44, probably. There were a few more weeks of coin minting after that, but more or less it should apply to this. And if we find such a coin, it should also be minted only after the 30th of July 100, probably even much later. Much better are actually dated coins like this one, which have an absolute date on 1799. That would be the most easiest way, and that's how it actually works on Dwarf Fortress. So we walked around the fortress and collected all the coins we can access and put them into this coin sheet. And here you see the amount of coins and the year they minted. And you can clearly see that the larger amounts of coins distribute in between the years of 5 and 11. Then there's a little bit lower excess of coins in the year 3, 4, 12, and there are none after the year of 12. So we could draw the archaeological conclusion that the fort was most likely founded around the year of 5, where the coins started to rise.
Not only that, we found coins which stated that they were related to the founding in year 5. So
yeah, we found a few ones. If you go back once, you can also see that we found some from the year 3 or 4.
But they were from other civilizations.
The higher amount of coins would be clearly from the years of use. And there were no coins after the year of 12, so we came to the conclusion that in the game world year of 12, this fortress was abandoned by the player. The next thing is that we took a look at the engravings and inscriptions, and here you can see all these statues. We actually built a statue garden on that level. That was quite nice for us. So we read the engravings on all of these statues that actually state what we call as historic events, and we see that one of these statues relates to the killing of the goblin Ostsensuit by the dwarf Zaludmomuz. And from this we could draw further conclusions. Like we do in archaeology, you might know this one is a famous author from Augsburg that relates to the big victory of the Roman and Germanic forces, their allies, over the Seminoles and Luthungi. And they actually prove that these tribes have existed and that there was a war from the Romans against these tribes. So we could draw further conclusions that the engraving, first of all, confirm our time frame. There were no engravings after the year of 12, and the engravings suggest the time of big conflict. And the next thing is that we look at the features or the objects that we found as features and try to check the context. So we found some dead dwarfs that lying around here. They're skeletonized bodies. We also found a dead elf and a dead goblin. So we draw further conclusions to this. The contents of the finds confirm a conflict, because we have a lot of dead bodies and they not have been taken to the burial grounds, what they actually do in the game. They would remove their dead ancestors and put them to burials. So there was no time for that. So the fort was also abandoned due to attacks by elves and goblins. So after excavating this whole site in this way, we have an actually very lively archaeology model. We have a date of the foundation, we have a date of the abandonment, we know about the conflicts, we know about the possible, attackers. And now we come to a big problem in archaeology, that on one side we have the historic reality, and on the other side we have the archaeological interpretation. And as you can see from this very basic model, they not often intersect very well. It's just like a short or a very little part of the historic reality that we actually grab with the archaeological methods. So we go to the historic reality by checking our model with the game log. And as you can see, in the late autumn of 12, a lot of dwarves died here, being struck down by a demon. Demons are not elves or goblins.
By multiple demons.
By multiple demons, to be sure. The nature also stated there. And then we have the absolute timeline over there that says founded in 5, been retired at 12, and then launched an expedition to reclaim the fortress again in 12. Oh, okay. So it was abandoned once, and then another group of dwarves arrived and tried to make it playable again, which didn't happen. So what really happened, comparing the archaeological model to what happened in the game world, is the fort was most likely found in the year of 5, that was right. The fort was abandoned in the year of 12, yes, twice, but we have a very, very short hiatus which we cannot grab with the archaeological method. So, but still, we would consider this as right. The fort was abandoned due to attacks by elves and goblins. That was dead wrong. It was demons, but the demons left no traces here. They just went back to hell or wherever they came from after that. There is hell, really. Dig down below and you will find hell. So it fell to the region of demons. And the elves that were actually there were traders arriving at the place caught in that invasion, so that was not too right. While the goblin was a fleeing captive, killed during his escape. They keep him in a cage down in the fortress, and during the attack he could escape. The fort was briefly reclaimed in the year 12, but the demons were still lingering inside, and it all fell back to this. So thanks for your attention. The game design learned a little of how archaeologists work, and the archaeologists probably learned something about how we can use the game as a model to check our own predictions and assumptions with the reality.
Yeah, I guess archaeologists also learned that unlike the dwarf, you should not dig too greedily and too deep.
You definitely should not.
That's not going to help. Yes, questions?
Hi, I'm not an archaeologist or a game developer, but I'm wondering why you didn't find dwarf corpses if you found an elf and a goblin corpses.
Because they were all slain at the same time, and nobody was there to remove the corpses. The dwarves were actually fighting the demons, killed in that instance. The goblin ran to the surface, but we also killed by probably the same demon. And the same goes for the elves who were arrived as traders and then got caught up in these demon invasions.
As you
Where
can
are
see
the
here.
dwarf bodies? Where were the dwarf bodies though?
They were also lying there.
They were there, okay.
Should we go back? It was just the little icons, but it was his blue bodies
Oh, okay.
lying there.
Thank you, that was very entertaining, by the way. Do you think there's other games that this would work for as an approach? Are there many other games that this would work for?
I don't think there are so many games that work like this, because the amount of simulation that's put into the world is just vast. I mean, there's a hydrological model, there are real-world geology. I could not show that all to you. We have to really skip it down. We did some network analysis on how sites relate based on the coins. I didn't show you that one. It's a really, really short one. And I think it's hardly possible with other games. And I always like when people ask me about, oh, you're an archaeologist, I played Caesar 3 or I played Attila Total War. Don't you think that's super accurate? And I say, no, I don't think so. This is probably more accurate in an archaeological way, even if it's a fantasy culture, because different civilizations go on war, they found different sites, they have access to various resources that they trade with each other, and it all happens in the background. Actually, this game was just running for 12 years. If you reach like year 300 or something, your computer will most likely crash down, and that's the end of it. If you don't die through an invasion or something, you die of frames per second lag. You will always die in the game.
Losing is fun.
Thank you. It was such a good talk. I was wondering if you'd heard about a game called Ultima Ratio Region, which is basically Dwarf Fortress, but it applies a cultural progression model.
I read briefly about it, but no further insights, and I haven't played it, so I can't really say something.
You're suggesting it?
Yes, I was going to say, I would love to see you actually apply this model to it. I think it would be a fantastic thing.
We get together in a break.
Yes,
I'm
definitely.
intrigued.
Any more questions? Otherwise, I suggest we move on to our next speaker. Oh, yeah, you have one. Oh, well, of course. Well, honorary member, we always make the time. There we go.
Well, to get back to the previous question, do you think that's why the AAA producers and other big game producers don't apply this type of model to their game because it's so vast and so big that it's just impossible? Or do you think it's a choice?
I think it's a choice that they need to make because they have to break even at some point. They have to release the game and make some money. I mean, this game is for 10 years in the making. It's still an alpha. It's pretty unplayable without additional tools. And they're developing it full time. And they say they will go on for another 20 years and then it will be ready. So no game developer that wants to make some money can do that. And on the other hand, is a model like that would be nice, but you still need the accessibility to play it. And while Minecraft takes all the basic elements and makes them much more accessible, you see how big that goes and where it leads. So if you want, it is detailed to an amount you can really not imagine. They even simulate the pressure in the single chambers on the bodies. If they fight, they have injuries on all different organs and whatever.
You can lose a
single
little finger
fingertip.
or a toe, and
in further combat that might bother you and whatsoever. So I don't think it's possible for real gaming. This is more like an art experience, and that's why it's at the MoMA.
Awesome, thanks.
Yeah, give it a try. Download the Lazy New Pack, otherwise you will not get to play it.